Multi-supplier imports in RPM Telco are different from single supplier imports. In the case that a spreadsheet would have more than one supplier on it. So these are usually found by or provided by your master agents or by, say, a provider that has multiple subdivisions that you might want to set up or something like that. So for example, I'll drag this example spreadsheet that I made here called example multi-supplier import. And a good way to tell is in most cases there will be this supplier columns or carrier column, provider column, and it'll list out a bunch of different supplier names. Now, if your spreadsheet has this, you know it's from a master agent or wherever it comes from, you might want to set it up as a multi-supplier import anyways. And what that just means is that you can set it up as a multi-supplier import, which I'll show you a little later, but you don't have to do the following works of it. You just have to create all the supplier names. So what we have to do here is set up a supplier called ACC Business and Test Supplier. Now, in the previous video, we set up the matrices for a single supplier import. We'll kind of be doing the same thing in this case. So for example, we'll go into our suppliers list, go into ACC Business, and we'll go into imports and transfers. Now we have an existing import matrix here at the bottom. I'll just drag this up. And we have a primary and an ACC-spiff. Those are a bunch of different matrices already. What we have to do is create another matrix for our multi-supplier import there. If you can't remember how to do that, there's a video for it previous, but you'll just click this, you'll fill in all the column names. That is all still the same. What you might want to do is go to our commission variables here, and we'll add an item variable. We'll call it source. I already have one created here, as you can see. The reason we create that is if we say edit the matrix again, we could type in the master agent. What this means is that we're mapping just a column called master agent to the source. So we'll have to go back into our spreadsheet here, and we'll have to add the master agent column. And we'll have to populate it down for every row of data we have. The reason we do this is it's totally optional, but if you want to keep track of where your commission data is coming from very easily in RPM, you can just put this extra work in, get the information from which master agent it came from, just map the column. It has to be spelled the same, but you can just map it into RPM and then just populate it in your spreadsheet, which is a little more work every month, but it's easier to pull reports on it down the line. So a little push and pull there if you want to set that up. Otherwise, if you don't and you don't care if it's how much you're getting as a total from a master agent, or if you would rather just build a report a different way, either by filtering out the suppliers and some other data fields, you can do it that way. Either way, we can just hit OK, create that matrix, and then what really separates a regular import from a multi-supplier import is the actual setup of it. So what you'll see here on the right is the multi-supplier import aliases. In this case, we'll hit setup. You'll see we already have a few in here as an example, but we'll add an extra one and we'll call it example. So this is just a name, so you can call it whatever you like. Normally you want to name it after your master agent so it's easier to keep track of. And then your supplier column name, which will just be the column on your spreadsheet for the supplier, whether it's provider, carrier, what have you. In this case, we'll hit OK. And then what that looks like after we created that is go to our import data page, go into import multi, and it'll show up here. So this is where we'll import it. You can find the spreadsheet that we're working on from wherever you have it on your computer and place it in here. That is assuming that you've set up the matrix for every supplier. Now here's where it gets a little complicated. If you've set it up for ACC Business and our test supplier, for example, let's just pretend that these matrices were set up, but we run into some smaller problems, like our ACC Business might be named something else on the spreadsheet. It might be called just ACC, in which case that's what the alias is for. If we click on the alias there, type in ACC as it would appear on the spreadsheet. So for example, if I pull the spreadsheet back up, let's say this was called ACC instead. So we already have a supplier called ACC Business, and technically they're the same supplier. It's just that our master agent labels it a bit differently than we do. So we can create an alias and call it ACC. What this will do is it'll take it whenever we import the multi-import example, for example, and it'll look through it for that alias instead of the regular supplier column or regular supplier name. It'll look for ACC and it'll map it to this multi-import. And then from here we can choose the matrix that we have set up for this. So for example, if we have something called master agent, we can select that matrix or whatever matrix we create for that specific spreadsheet. We'll hit OK there. And then from there, we also might have to do the same for our test supplier, but in this case we do not, because the supplier name is the same for our test supplier as it is for or what it is on the spreadsheet. So we don't have to do anything there. A thing that does catch people sometimes is that the supplier name is always what the multi-import looks at first. So if, for example, I had ACC business spelled out the same on that spreadsheet, and instead of it being ACC, when we run the import, it will automatically look into ACC and default to the primary matrix, which could be a problem. If, for example, ACC SPIF is the matrix we want to use for our multi-supplier import, then we definitely don't want it to default to the primary, because we'll get an import error and it won't go in. So in cases where we have multiple master agents going to the same supplier, so say pretend this says Aliases and this says WTG or Sandler or whoever your master agent is, you'll want to make sure that the supplier name might be something unique, something small. It could be ACC business with a period at the bottom, and then you can just have an alias for each of those master agents, each listing out their different matrix choice, which just lets you more easily control where that import is going. But if you do run into an issue, you can always contact us at support@rpmtelco.com when setting this up. And yeah, that's mostly it.